My name is Yunxin. I graduated last year. yeah, I graduated last year from RI, and yeah, currently I'm a relief teacher in RI. I'm teaching physics. I'm teaching J1 physics. Yeah. I think the accomplishment I'm the proudest of would probably be in physics Olympiad. Yeah, essentially in secondary four, I went for the Singapore Junior Physics Olympiad, so SJPHO, right? Yeah, and I did pretty well, and I'm quite proud of that. Mostly because before that, I think it's my first time participating in the physics Olympiad, honestly, and also since that year was COVID, it was 2020, right? So actually we had circuit breaker for the majority of that year. So what I did was I mostly just spent most of CB just preparing for the Olympiad, studying on my own as well. And I think it was definitely difficult because I couldn't really ask my teachers for help, right? Because we're all at home and there's just a lot of free time in general. So I think I'd say I'm just proud of myself for being able to carry out this sort of self-teaching venture because I ended up teaching myself most of the H2 physics as well, just in time for the Olympiad. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm proudest of that because of I'm just proud that I was able to use my time well during CB and actually learn useful things. So yeah, the experience was really enjoyable for me as well. I like running. I'm not great at it, but I do like running and hiking as well. I think sometimes on the weekends I like to go hiking with my friends. Recently I went with one of my friends to I think Dairy Farm. Yeah, and Bukit Timah Hill as well. And back in JC, I think nearly every weekend my colleagues and I will go to yeah, I think honestly speaking, outside of academics, most of my time went to either research or council. So yeah, council took out the bulk of my time in JC. But yeah, so during my time in council, I was the vice president of department. So I was essentially just overseeing the three departments, CCA department, welfare department, as well as communications, Comms D, if some of y'all know. Yeah. And yeah, I think it was really fulfilling. I spent a lot of time in meetings, honestly, and also just being in the council room, doing preparations for initiatives, staying back late and so on. But I think that was where the bulk of my social interactions came from, just because of how much time I spent in council with the rest of my councillors as well. And yeah, I think we also helped to plan some other initiatives. I was in open house, yeah, as well as the council camp as well, which is an internal council event to welcome the new batch of councillors. So yeah, I think that was really fun. Definitely very tiring, especially during orientation when we were the OGLs as well, and we also had to manage other of the orientation activities and so on. But I kind of believe that suffering brings people together in some sense. I mean, council is not exactly suffering, but just being so tired but having to keep pushing through and just working together, that was really fulfilling. And I think that was what really strengthened the bonds that I had with the rest of my councillors. So yeah, I think lots of lifelong friendship from council, definitely. I think funnily enough, I'm actually not gonna be a teacher. Yeah, I think I did a lot of research in JC, but I think what I realized from research is that I do enjoy the science aspect, but I can't really see myself working in a lab 24/7 in a sense in the future. So funnily enough, I'm actually gonna do finance instead. Yeah, I'm actually on a GIC scholarship. So I'll be working at GIC. So they invest Singapore's funds, right, in overseas companies, but also being able to blend that interest with science as well. So perhaps doing things like due diligence of biotech companies and so on. So yeah, I think that's definitely where I will end up in after my uni. Yeah, in finance, but also with a touch of science as well. I find that, I mean, in a sense, I think everyone has the same amount of time in the day, right? We all have 24 hours. I think what matters is just to get your priorities right. For me, I found that, I think, okay, of course, sacrifices have to be made. But for me, for instance, I wouldn't say I had much of a sacrifice in terms of my social life or anything, because most of my social interactions came from council, right? As I said earlier on. So being able to sort of derive that social interactions and also those friendships from council really helped me. I think that's how I found my balance in a sense. So even though council does have a lot of work involved, but having those interactions, having those friendships, that definitely helped to even that out in a sense. So I wasn't really stressed out. And even if council work got stressful, at least there were people to support me. So yeah, I think in terms of time management tips, like I said, so getting your priorities right. And I find that, it really depends on what you want to do, right? So for me, I really was interested in research. I also wanted to do council work. And I also wanted to get my accounts in order. So I just had a lot of things I wanted to do. So those are my priorities. And so I worked based on those priorities. So for instance, I think there were definitely times during break, for instance, where I would just sit in the classroom and do my tutorials, right? Because that's my priorities. I wanted to get my academics in order. And I also made sure it wasn't like the whole break, right? Of course, I'll go and eat. I'll spend time with my friends. But breaks are very long. So you can always utilize the rest of your breaks to do your work, right? And if you really need the break, especially you're very tired, then take a nap or something. So I think it just depends on your priorities. Yeah. For me, I think you can do anything if you set your heart to it. That's what I firmly believe, at least. Because during my time in RSI as well, I missed school for I think 1 or 2 months. But I think academic-wise, it was still possible to catch up because afterwards I just put in the extra effort in the following months to catch up in time of promos. So if you're very clear on what you want to do, and you think, okay, I have so many different commitments and I want to do them all, then sometimes there isn't enough space because realistically speaking, you can't fit everything in a day, right? But if you cut out those that you think are not the most important and you still have a number of them left, I think it's definitely possible to schedule things around to fit it so that you can do everything that you want to do. Yeah. I guess if you're from RI, look out on Stanford for research opportunities. There's really quite a lot. And even if you don't do RSI, like the Research Science Institute that I did, you can also do the I can't remember the name in RI, but there's the Raffles Science Mentorship Program, right? The SRP, right? So there's SRP, the Science Research Program in JC. Then there's the RI version of that as well, I think. So you do the research at RI instead of at external institutes. So those are opportunities already. If I'm not wrong, there's things like DSTA and DSO also have their own research programs, which I personally didn't go for, but I think some of my friends did. So I think there's definitely a wealth of opportunities out there. It's more of, if you're interested in research and you want to do it, then you have to put in the effort to look for those opportunities, right? That's one thing. And second thing is, I think in general, when you're applying for research projects, it's important to show demonstrated interest. I think what any mentor or any professor wants to see is that you're curious about their project and you're also willing to put in the work for it. I think research is definitely not easy, right? Because you have to go out to the lab once or even more than once a week to do the research project. And also you have to do a lot of reading up in your own time. So if you're really interested in research, just be aware that you have to commit time and effort to it. It's not as easy as it just looks on the surface. Just write a paper and do experiments. The work itself is a lot more than that. And also just be aware that in the application process, you should show to the professor that you are genuinely passionate about the project and you really want the opportunity to partake in it. I think that's really help when you're applying for any research programs. Yeah. College applications. I mean, I think it depends on where you're applying to. Personally, I applied to only the UK and the US. I think, I guess this is not very general advice, but for the UK, since they're really looking at your academics, so get your academics in order. Actually, I think that's the same thing for the US as well. In general, get your academics in order. Your A-levels and your prelims should always be your priority. That's one thing. And then if you want to go on to the specific applications itself, for UK, I think generally for the personal statement, they want a more academic approach. So for me, I talked a lot more about my research. I talked about the specific scientific concepts that were involved as well. I think they like to see that you know your academics and all the theoretical foundation of the programs that you partake in. Versus for the US, it's more, they want to know who you are as a person, so more of your personality. So I'd say for UK, just focus on talking about what your academic experiences already, research, or could be lectures that you watch in your own time, books, TED Talks, anything is okay. And for US, it's more of think about your experiences that you've had in your life. Doesn't have to be academic, doesn't have to be research program or anything. And just think about what are the experiences that have truly shaped you as a person. And really put yourself on a page for US applications and write like how you're speaking to a friend. I think that's my best piece of advice. Because if you write too formally, it doesn't sound personal. But for the US, they really want to see the aspect of your personality shine through. Just write like how you would talk to any person and just put your heart on the paper. I think that's the most important thing I'd say for US applications. Yeah. I think I haven't done enough to give any warnings. But I think if you're interested in finance, it's just sort of similar to research. Just read out in your own time. For me, I tried watching some finance lectures in my own time as well. I'm working through this undergraduate finance course now online. There's a wealth of resources available online. You just need to search and Google and look for it. There's really a lot of things you can do to work through and read up things in your own time. So I think have that initiative to teach yourself the new concepts, since finance is not something that you're exposed to in JC or secondary school, right? And secondly, it would also be I mean, if there are finance-related competitions, like case study comps or something along those lines, and are available for you now, then just go for it. Again, similar to what I said earlier on for SYPT, there's no harm. If you don't make it, you don't make it, and that's okay. But it's always a learning experience, regardless of whether you succeed or fail. So just have the initiative to not just read up in your own time and look up for resources, but also to participate in related opportunities like competitions. I think that will really help. Yeah. I think if you're taking the A-levels this year and you haven't started preparing, you should probably start preparing. Don't wait until June or September holidays to start crabbing, because I think prelims are very important, not just for college applications, but just in general, prelims are important. So you should really start your preparations before that. And I think it's also a saying where, well, not a saying, but there's this idea that people like to only study for, like you can just party and relax for most of JC and then just start cramming toward the last 2 terms. Personally, I do not agree with that. I find that consistent work is much more guaranteed. It's a much more secure way of doing well in your A-levels. So if you can start early, start early. And especially since CCA stand down is happening or has already happened, all the more that you have free time now, right? So just buck out on the subjects that you are not as confident in. Reach out to your teachers for consults, especially if you need them. Do a lot of practices, especially for the sciences. Just keep doing the revision packages, keep doing all the practices that you can get. And yeah, I think just start now if you can and don't wait any longer. Yeah. But also, another piece of advice would just be, don't stress yourself out too much as well. There is definitely still time. And I think if you stress yourself out too much and you try to cram everything now, you also burn out as well, which is not good for your performance in A-levels as well. So yeah, while you should start now, don't be too intensive as well. Still be kind to yourself and take care of yourself. Yeah, that's my piece of advice.
Sure.
Go Pascal!